Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other, 'cause Jesus is the way.
Today we're going to be talking about the subject of personality disorders. And this is one of the most difficult areas. There are more mistakes in diagnosis made in this particular area. Now, how are personality disorders different from the rest of DSM-4? What is a personality? It's how you have learned to cope with life. It's the sum of your coping mechanisms of what you are like as a person. So the way this is different in Axis 1 disorders, and by the way, this is an Axis 2 disorder. It goes on Axis 2, not Axis 1. So you can have both. The person has a short-term problem, say with depression or bipolar or even schizophrenia and so on. What we're talking about here is a complete personality. In other words, how they're trying to cope with life. Now, for it to be dysfunctional, for it to fit this area of mental illness, what does it mean? Well, let's face it, everybody over here, even what we might call healthy people, probably have some dysfunctional ways in which they cope with life, right? And then we have what we call codependency, where people are more dysfunctional. But it's when it gets really, really extreme, to the point that it is non-functional, that we're here in this particular area of these personalities. So when do we cross the line between codependency and into mental illness? That's very hard to judge. But it's going to be extremes, much more than you've ever seen before. It's going to be a small percentage of the people that are going to fall into this category. And in a lot of cases, it's going to be very obvious. But the problem is it can be very confused with other things. The difference is that it affects every aspect of the person's life. It's among the most difficult to treat. Why? Because it affects every aspect of the person's life. You're not dealing with one narrow area. Long-standing and begins before adulthood. When is personality established? One suggestion is 80% of your personality is established by age 8. Does not have long-standing periods of remission. Do not vary greatly in intensity. Isn't like one time they're all totally out of it over here and then they're acting pretty well together over here. No, they're out of it all the time. Does not improve over time. It's the way they relate. It may predispose to the development of Axis 1 disorders. Now, they break this up into clusters. There are certain groups of personality disorders. And the first one is called Cluster A. And I'm going to suggest the underlying problem in Cluster A is insecurity. They're withdrawn, cold, suspicious, irrational. It could be related to or confused with schizophrenia, and many times it is. There are a couple of these that look very much like schizophrenia, and do we have that short-term peak, or do we have it pervades the entire person? Because schizophrenia tends to pervade the person as well. A few come in for treatment, so you're not going to see many of these people. They distrust therapy and treatment. The first one is called the paranoid personality disorder. They're afraid of others, inappropriately suspicious and distrustful of others, active self-focused style of functioning, sustained by negative reinforcement, vigilant against threats, resistant to external authority, and controlling depending on themselves for survival, edgy, jealous, impulsive, quick to react with anger to threats. What are they going to think about you as the counselor? They're going to be suspicious of you, aren't they? Here's the criteria. Beginning in early adulthood, distrustful and suspicious of others, motives are seen as malevolent, shown by at least 4 of the following: unfounded suspicion that the others are deceiving, exploiting, or harming them; preoccupation with unjustified doubts of loyalty or trustworthiness of associates or friends; reluctance to confide in others; perception of hidden, demeaning, or threatening contact in ordinary events; persistent bearing of grudges; perception of personal attacks on reputation or character which are not perceived by others, and responds quickly with anger and counterattacks; unjustified reoccurring suspicions of fidelity of spouse or sexual partner, not solely in the context of a psychotic disorder or due to a mental condition. So what's going to cause something like this? Demanding, rejecting parents. Rejection leads to overvigilance, to danger or rejection. Projection of hostility on others. They may feel that way inside, and so they just say everybody else is that way. Set of strategies to combat feelings of humiliation, shame, and inadequacy. If I feel inadequate inside of myself, and I don't want to admit that, then who could I blame? You. And if I really see that and that becomes part of me, then I'm going to turn it on. You're going to say, you aren't safe, so therefore I have to take care of myself. And I'm suspicious that everyone is out to get me and everybody is against me. Drug treatment is ineffective. That's what makes this so hard. If you're dealing with schizophrenia or something, drug treatment will actually help some. But with this paranoid personality disorder, it's not going to make a big difference. What do? Find the underlying anger or anxiety or family experiences and deal with them. Probably systematic desensitization, EMDR, theophostic counseling, that kind of stuff. Because if you take this one straight on, what's going to happen? Well, tell me, when did you start first working for the CIA? And if you try to convince them that you don't work for the CIA, they train you very well at the CIA, don't they? You really know how to do this. So everything you do is going to add more suspicion to it. See, how do you get through those barriers? Many times you go around the back and you try and figure out what's underneath the problem and deal with the issues that are underneath the problem before you can actually get them to even admit they have a problem. Help them deal effectively with their problems. Maybe teach them the skills that they need. But from a Christian point of view, what would you tend to do? Try and help them, get them saved, and help them to be able to trust and rely on God. Because then they could trust in Him no matter what other people do, right? The next one, and you got to really listen to these, okay? Because they get very confusing as to which they are, because some of them look a lot the same. This is the schizoid personality disorder. If it starts with that word like in schizophrenia, guess what? It's going to look a lot like schizophrenia. Lack of social context because they prefer to be alone. What type of schizophrenia would this be close to? How about the type where they don't show anything? Not like the paranoid. This is going to be like the one where they just have flat affect. They don't do anything. Withdrawn or lacks feelings for others. Passive and unable to receive reinforcement from themselves and others. Avoids all forms of overstimulation. They're detached. They can't rely on themselves or others. Lack spontaneity and initiative and display little need for social or sexual activity. They deny their needs. I think that's the key. See, think of it this way. Every one of these is a particular strategy in life to make things okay when they can't get their needs met. What's a good strategy? If you can't get your needs met, you don't have any needs. So therefore you don't have a problem, do you? And because you have no needs, you don't need anybody else. You can just sort of drop out of life and be nothing. And it's okay, since you have no needs. Criteria: beginning in early adulthood, isolated from social relationships, and shows restricted emotional range in interpersonal relationships, are present in a number of situations as shown by 4 of the following. Never wants nor likes close relationships, including those of the family. That's a real key. They want nothing to do with their mom, nothing to do with their family, their mothers, their siblings. Nearly always prefer solitary activities, has little interest in sexual activity, enjoys few activities, if any, has no close friends or confidants except relatives, is emotionally cold, detached, or bland, not due to a psychotic disorder, etc. Defense against the need for social contact, loyalty toward abusive parents results in low self-esteem rather than anger. In other words, they turned everything on themselves. When they were being abused, when things went bad in their family, it's all my fault, I'm no good, I can't meet my needs, I can't do anything. Childhood marked by traumas, inability to give and receive love, cannot achieve self-esteem, self-affirmation, self-confidence, or belonging. Suffers from an unintegrated self. They're unsure who they are and are unable to relate to others. Profound vagueness and poverty of thought. Can't scan the environment effectively or perceive accurately. Children have development delays in language, education, and motor functioning. So this person is what pretty much, they're not there, the lights are on, but they're not there. How would you help them? It's going to be difficult, isn't it? But can you work with the underlying fears, deal with relationships, expose them to the fears, and show them that it's not really as dangerous as they think? Social skills, teach emotions. Group therapy is useful to provide a safe environment for social contact. Somehow you're going to have to teach them the world isn't really the way they see it. Otherwise, they're going to continue to use the defense, aren't they? Now, here's the one that's very much like it, and listen very carefully. This is schizotopal. The first one was schizoid. This is schizotopal. Fear of rejection, handicapped in all interactions with others, including acute discomfort in close relationships, cognitive and perceptual distortions, and behavioral eccentricities. Feel intensely lonely. So these people still don't have the relationships, but they are afraid of the relationships. The other one just doesn't want the relationships. Striking defects in obtaining reinforcement of any kind, paralyzed, void, or incapable of meaningful action. They have withdrawn, fantasy, and other eccentric behavior, which are used to escape overstimulation or unmanageable stress. So they just have a strategy of withdrawing to protect themselves so they don't get rejected and don't get hurt. Beginning in early childhood, experiences isolation, discomfort with social relationships, and has perceptual and cognitive distortions and peculiar behavior in a variety of situations as shown by 5 of the following. Now think about this. Do you see how the thing turns in on itself? If they have peculiar behavior, how are people probably going to react to them? With rejection. And then they're going to be afraid of the rejection, and then they cope with it in ways that cause peculiar behavior. 5 of the following. Ideas of reference which are not delusions. They think other people are talking about them. Behavior influenced by odd beliefs or by magical thinking inconsistent with cultural norms. Usually superstition, or maybe telepathy or things like that. Unusual perceptions or body illusions. Odd speech, vague, excessively abstract, impoverished, paranoid, suspicious ideas. Affect is constricted in range and inappropriate to the topic. Odd behavior or appearance. No close friends or confidants except close relatives. Marked anxiety in social situations that is not reduced by familiarity associated with paranoid fears rather than negative self-image. Not psychotic mood or pervasive development disorder. So what's this person like? They're the weird person at work that everyone just avoids and wants nothing to do with, and maybe a couple good codependent enablers will be nice to just because they are trying to be nice to somebody, but maybe more out of pity than out of anything else. Perform poorly on tests of attention like schizophrenia. Also higher dopamine in enlarged ventricle. However, linked to relatives with mood disorders, which is interesting. This is more linked to mood disorders than it is linked to schizophrenia itself. Treatment goals. Help them reconnect to the world, address boundary problems, prevent further isolation, ease loneliness, accentuate strengths, avoid overstimulation, self-awareness of feelings, teach skills. See, a lot of these things in personality disorders, what's their skill level? Not good at all. So you teach those skills, and that's how you're able to help them. We're going to find over and over again, and in the next one we're going to find even more dialectic behavior therapy, which is teaching emotional skills and coping skills. See that over and over again. Antisocial behavior. A pattern of violence, criminal, or unethical exploitive behavior, and the inability to feel affection for others. Active, self-focused, and sustained by actively pursuing short-term pleasure. A lot of people with this have had no connection as a child. They've never bonded. They move from reaction attachment disorder to oppositional defiant disorder to antisocial personality disorder. That is sort of the sequence that you see here. Here are the criteria. Before age 15, for 12 months or more, violates rules, norms, or the rights of others as shown by at least 3 of these. Frequent bullying and threatening. Starting fights. Uses a weapon that could cause serious injury. Physical cruelty to people. Physical cruelty to animals. Engaged in theft with confrontation, like armed robbery, extortion, mugging, or purse snatching. Forced sex upon someone. Deliberately sets fires to cause serious damage. Deliberately destroys property. Broke into a building, car, or house. Stole valuables. Before age 13, stayed all night against parents' wishes. Ran away overnight twice. Truancy before age 13. See, that's all before age 15. So what are they really saying? They have oppositional defiance disorder before this. And it's a big hint of what we're going to end up with antisocial personality disorder. Now, after age 15, patient disregards the rights of others demonstrated by 3 of these. Behavior with grounds for arrest. Lies, uses aliases, or cons others for gain or gratification. Impulsive and does not plan ahead. Shows irritability and aggression through recurrent physical fights and assaults. Recklessly disregards safety of others. Irresponsible in employment or finances. Lacks remorse for injurious behavior. That's your biggest key. To have this diagnosis, though, they have to be 18 years old. Otherwise, you have the oppositional defiance disorder. And it's not due to schizophrenia, being manic, or something like that. Etiology. Lack of bonding or love in infancy and history of childhood abuse. Many parents have the same disorder. Attempt to bond using power and distraction. Failure to relate results in a lack of conscience. Treatment. Kid before age 11, sometimes they use holding therapy to try to help that kid bond. Once an adult, there's no specific intervention that is very effective. 70% left treatment prematurely. Some challenging and rigorous wilderness programs can help in something like this: building self-esteem, self-confidence, interpersonal focus. So to get that picture, what do we have? A criminal. 10% of people who don't care about anything, don't feel anything, don't feel any remorse, basically are going to do whatever they're going to do. Big clues: watch for the fire starting, watch for the destruction of animals. Just doing stuff like that where they just don't seem to care, period. Next is borderline personality disorder. Marked instability in self-image, mood, and relationships. Impulsive and self-destructive. Basically, extremely volatile in the area of feeling abandoned. What's the real underlying problem? Probably don't feel loved. But the problem is that it's gone way beyond that, to the point that they can't regulate their emotions. And so the emotions are just all over the place. A borderline that I was working with, an example, would just lose it and break all the dishes in the house. Right in this session, because her husband was saying he wasn't going to be available at a certain time, she regressed to like 3 years old and started pounding on him. We're talking about huge, huge issues here, up and down and all over the place, and not being able to get a hold of what is going on. Listen to some of the criteria here. Early adult life, the patient has unstable impulse control, interpersonal relationships, moods, and self-image. Those are the critical things. These persistent and recurrent qualities are present in a variety of situations shown by at least 5 of the following. Frantic attempts to prevent abandonment, whether real or imagined. Unstable relationships that alternate between idealization and devaluation. Identity disturbance. They don't know who they are. Potentially self-damaging impulsiveness in at least 2 areas, such as binge eating, reckless driving, sex, spending, or substance abuse. Self-mutilation and suicidal thoughts, threats, and other behavior. If you have a cutter, you have a possibility this is what's going on. Severe reactivity to mood leading to marked instability. Chronic feelings of emptiness. That's another key. Anger is out of control and inappropriate and intense, demonstrated by frequent temper displays, physical fights, and constantly angry. Brief paranoid ideas and severe dissociative symptoms relating to stress. So what are the key big things you're looking for? The disassociation, the self-mutilization, and the emotional volatility to feelings of abandonment. Those will be the ones that will just stand out hugely. Dialectic behavior therapy is the primary thing that's used here. Relationships and healing of memories. We have so much junk, so many problems to try to deal with this. Very difficult because of dependency. It was that they may become dependent on you, and if you get late sometime, that's it. They're going to hugely react to feelings of abandonment by you, the counselor. Difficult balancing boundaries in relationships, but significant character change is possible. Termination may be difficult because, again, they're going to feel abandoned, right? So you deal with all of these underlying areas, but another huge area you have to be aware of is suicide. These people are very volatile and many times will commit suicide. So you need to do all the anti-suicide prevention and those kind of things. The next one is histrionic personality disorder. This one is dealing with self-worth. And again, you have to really listen to these because the next one after this is going to seem very similar to this one. Attention-seeking, active and other focused, and sustained by negative reinforcement. avoid pain by relying on others. The needs for affection and support are an effort to avoid boredom and the pain of emotional emptiness. They solicit attention, praise, reassurance, and approval. This is that super needy person. They're much more than a codependent, though. Criteria: early adult life, emotional excess, and attention seeking as shown by at least 5 of the following. Discomfort with situations in which the patient is not the center of attention. Relationships that are frequently fraught in inappropriate, seductive, and sexually provocative behavior. Expression of emotions that is shallow and rapidly shifting. Frequently focus of attention on the self through use of physical appearance. Speech that is vague and lacks detail. Overly dramatic expression of emotion. A particular lady that had this, not in real strong level, was constantly being in beauty pageants. And she would dress in such a way that when she walked in the room, everybody would look at her. But what the real key was, if people didn't look at her, let's say she's walking down the hall and there's somebody coming to her, especially if it was a male, and wouldn't look at her, she would actually step in front of him. So he had to look at her. But do you see the thing? They're going to try to get that attention because attention means to them what? They're worthwhile. They're okay. Okay, the next is narcissistic personality disorder. Now, how is narcissistic personality disorder different from this one? The narcissistic person, it's all grandiosity. They are great, they are wonderful, they are famous. Everyone ought to look up to them. They have all the answers to everything. They're totally self-focused on themselves. It's a lot like what we just discussed there in the histrionic, except it's totally focused on how great they are. They're going to tell you all sorts of stories of what God has called them to do or all the great things that they've done in their life. See the difference? The first one, okay, where we're dealing here with the histrionic, okay, is a self-worth issue. This is a significance issue. They have to be somebody in life. They have to be somebody that really counts. Overly expansive egocentrism that seek praise, admiration, and special consideration from others, especially self-important and self-absorbed in everything that's going on in their life. But the biggest thing here that makes this different than the others is that this is a grandiose sense of self-importance, exaggerating ability and accomplishments, preoccupation with fantasies of beauty, brilliance, ideal love, power, limitless success. They have these great ideas of who they are. They believe that personal uniqueness renders the patient fit only for association with people or institutions of rarefied status. They need excessive admiration, a sense of entitlement, favorable treatment or granting of desires, exploitation of others. People owe them something because they're great. The rules don't really apply to them. Tend to be arrogant or haughty in their attitude and in their behavior. What would you do to help somebody like this? Again, deal with the real issue inside. How do they feel about themselves? Unimportant, right? So what are you going to have to do? Help them understand that God loves them and that they're okay and they don't have to perform and they don't have to be somebody. But it's going to die very hard. A lot of these different issues are very hard to deal with because they're so set. If they can just be somebody, then they'll be important, right? Is that going to work? Absolutely not. The next is avoidant personality disorder. And some of these are going to look a lot like the codependent stuff that you've seen before. Really, a fear of rejection leads to isolation. They actively avoid the pain of rejection and humiliation by withdrawal, detached and active in their avoidance of others. Extract put-downs from the very encounter. They expect energy, avoiding all potential threats. So they'll do anything here to just stay away from things. Beginning in early adulthood, social inhibition, hypersensitivity to criticism, and feelings of inadequacy are shown by 4 of these. Fears criticism, disapproval, or rejection. Will only become involved with others if they're certain of being liked. Is restrained in intimate relations for fear or ridicule and shame. In social situations, preoccupied with concerns of being criticized or rejected, experiences inhibitions in new relationships stemming from feeling of inadequacy, is convinced of being inferior, unappealing, or inept. A fear of embarrassment. What are we going to have to do? Again, help them realize who they really are and deal with those issues and experiences in the past. Like it also, dependent personality disorder. What's going on here? This is like heavy codependence again. Unable to make choices and decisions independently. Only this person is going to be so dependent on other people that they can't live or exist without them or function without them. Cannot tolerate being alone. Passive, over-focused, seeking to avoid emotional pain by depending on others. Submissive to avoid losing support. Beginning in early adulthood, in their life, they need to be taken care of, and they leads to clinging, submissive behavior, and fears of separation shown by at least 5 of these. Need for excessive advice and reassurance to make everyday decisions. Need for others to be responsible of most major life areas. Feared loss of approval and support leads to difficulty with expressing disagreement. Trouble with starting projects and carrying them out independently. Willing to go to excessive lengths to get nurture and support. Discomfort and helplessness, and exaggerated fears of being alone. If one close relationship is lost, urgently seek another to provide the care and the support. Preoccupation with unrealistic fears of abandonment. Over-involvement with intrusive parents. That's what's this kind of thing. I had a client like this who the mom totally made all the decisions in the family and would come over and do all the housework and would take care of the child because the kid didn't seem to be able to do anything. That overprotection makes them feel what? There's something wrong with me, or the world is too scary out there. I can't live without this person totally and completely taking care of me. What are you going to have to do? Set good boundaries. Probably treat the partner also. There's probably going to be a whole independence, dependence thing here going on. And dominance and control. Watch out for transference. What do you think the chances are this person might lock onto you? Deal with feelings of incompetence and helplessness. Assertiveness training. Unconditional acceptance, group therapy, and teach them some skills where they can succeed at something. And the last one is obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. This is not the same thing as excessive-compulsive behavior. And you have to be careful here because they don't even look exactly the same. The difference is in the personality disorder, you're dealing more with legalism. A perfectionistic adherence to rules, regulations, and expectations of others. Needs to be in control of something. Now we know that those are the core things that underlie obsessive-compulsive behavior, axis 1. But here it's their entire lifestyle. And this is going to be really hard to tell whether you're going to give this an Axis 1 or an Axis 2, depending on your client and what is going on. Criteria. Beginning in early adult life, a preoccupation with control, orderliness, and perfection overshadow the qualities of effectiveness shown by at least 4 of the following. Is absorbed with details, lists, and orders, organization, rules, and schedules to the extent that the purpose of the activity is lost. Is perfectionistic to the degree that interferes with completing the task. Is a workaholic to the exclusion of leisure activities. To the degree out of keeping with the culture or religious influence, is overly conscientious, inflexible, or scrupulous about ethics, morals, or values. Saves worthless items of no real sentimental value. And ask the question, where does the hoarder fit? This is where the hoarder fits. Won't cooperate or delegate tasks unless others agree to do things the patient's way. Is stingy towards self and others, hoarding money against the future need. Is rigid and stubborn. Where does this all come from? Struggle with parents over control results in unacceptable anger, which is contained by rigid control. Copes by trying to conform. Black and white distorted thinking. Because they're so insecure, they're trying to be in control, so they make everything black and white, and they're trying to keep everything in control so they can feel secure, relying totally on themselves. They usually don't think there's anything wrong, so they're probably not going to come for treatment, except for some Axis 1 disorder. Maybe, again, obsessive-compulsive disorder or something else like that. And then you're going to see this whole pervasive thing in their life. Help them develop awareness of feelings, overcome insecurities, accept limitations, learn to have fun and loosen up, get them out of their black and white thinking, help them deal with worry and procrastination. A lot of different issues here of different things going on in their lives. And of course, we have personality disorder not otherwise specified. What do you use that for? Everything else that doesn't fit these particular models that we've just been looking at, right? How about spec? How much of this is based spiritual, physical, experiential, or based on the person's choice? Well, spirits can take advantage of anything, can't they? So there's a lot of opening here for spirits to be in there, but they're probably, you don't see them very clearly unless the person is doing something very spiritual. Possibly in the OCD, personality disorder, you're going to see that in them being very legalistic in religion and stuff, and spirits could take advantage of that. Physical, some of these could have a predisposition, but some of them are related like mood disorder, especially like the schizoid and schizotopal and things like that could have some strong physical connections here. But how about experience? See, how do we learn how to cope in life? It's based on our experiences, how we see other people cope, and we come up with methods. It's just that these are taken and made very, very excessive. And finally, choice. How many of these things are choices? These are all choices of how they're choosing to cope with things. But what's the problem? They don't work. So somehow you're going to have to help that client realize that their method they're doing is actually making things worse. The snowball is going down the hill and getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they're getting more and more non-functional based on the things that they're doing. When you think of all these that we're talking about, if you see these people in real life, how do you react? There's something weird here. I don't know what's going on. And that's how they're normally treated. And so it makes the problem worse and worse and worse. So what's one of the biggest things you're going to have to do in treatment? Unconditional positive regard. They need unconditional love, acceptance, and value from you and people around you. Deal with the core issues. What are the core issues? You can plot them out on this. They deal primarily with self-worth, significance, love, and security again, don't they? Only they're in a much greater level, and the person has gone into this loop, and they've got bigger and bigger and bigger until they've consumed the person. Faith in God. What if they could believe that their needs are all being met, and God was going to take care of them, and God loved them and accepted them even if other people didn't? What would be some other good things to use? How about theophostic ministry to deal with the underlying issues that are going on in this person's life? And in most of these, you're going to have to add in the skills training, aren't you? Because by the time you're going to see these people, how many problems they're going to have and how much of a deficit are you going to be dealing with in their life. It's going to be absolutely huge. And then the other thing is spiritual growth. What if we could take them step by step through spiritual growth until they develop the confidence that with God everything is possible, and that this can be overcome in their life? This is a whole faith issue here. Who is taking care of them in all of these personality disorders? Them. Again, they're their own God, trying to make things work. The only thing they can rely on is themselves. So if you can take them and get them a relationship with God, where they can listen to God, where God can work on them, progress can be made. From straight secular psychology, little hope is given for people with personality disorders because they're so pervasive. I believe with God's help, you can make major improvements in the lives of these people. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you that you are our God and that you have the answers, and we can rely on you instead of in ourselves, and we don't have to go to excessive things to make life work for us, but we can trust and rely on you and just accept ourselves as we are and give you all the glory and the honor in Jesus' name. Amen.
Is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no other, 'cause Jesus is the way. Jesus is the answer for the world today. Above him there's no